Please welcome Professor Mark Shtaif, Rector of Tel Aviv University.
Good morning. Hello, and thank you for waking up so early in the morning. And welcome to the 2023 Rector Symposium. We chose to name this symposium Past, Present, and Future because as a research university, we try to study our past and our present and use our knowledge in order to design the future. But formally, as we know, the present is a passing moment in time. It has no duration. Everything preceding it is the past, and everything succeeding it is the future. Yet in our language and culture, we don't perceive it in this way. I believe that for most of us, the present is the period of time in which the past dictates the future with high probability so that it merges with it and creates something that we call present. In other words, the present is the time frame in which most things around us remain more or less as they are. However, in recent times, it seems that the number of such stable things is decreasing. I realize that in many ways this statement is subjective, as each of us can imagine for himself or herself how surprised he or she would be if they woke up today to our social and political reality after being absent from it for a decade, a year, or a month. If you are very surprised after just 1 month, then our present is fairly short, isn't it? But what is not subjective and what is astounding beyond any doubt is the pace at which technologies, especially information technologies, advance and shape the space around us, change our lives, and require adjustments to how we handle our affairs. In many ways, the recent past, things that we experienced just a few years ago, feels like very distant past. While the distant future, what we thought was the distant future, is rapidly approaching and storming upon us. And what remains of the present? The present is being eroded from both sides and getting shorter. So before it completely disappears, we mark it here, along with the past and the future, in 3 lectures given by 3 of our wonderful faculty. The lecture on the past will tell us about ancient humans. The lecture on the present will enlighten us about labor relation systems. And the lecture on the future will tell us how higher education needs to be shaped in order to optimally serve society's needs in the future. After these lectures, we will hold a brief panel with our 3 speakers. We will listen to questions and try to answer them. So let me start with the first speaker for today. And the first talk will be given by Professor Sarig from the Goldschleger School of Dental Medicine. Professor Sarig is heading the Dan David Center for Human Evolution and Biohistory Research, as well as the Shmunis Family Anthropology Institute. Her main research interest is in studying the evolutionary and environmental effects on oral health in prehistoric populations and their implications to modern societies. The title of her talk is Your Teeth Over Time, an Evolutionary Perspective of Modern Health. Racheli, come on.
Whoa. Hello, good morning. Are you awake? What? It's working? שומעים? לא? שומעים אותי? Okay, the lights, I can't see you. I need to see that you're not asleep. So welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. And I would like to share with you, I have 10 to 15 minutes, and I would like to share with you some of the research we're doing. So this is me, younger, prettier. In my clinic, I'm a dentist. I specialize in orthodontics. And as you can see, we treat patients. I teach at the dental school, at the orthodontic departments. But my other hat, I'm a dental anthropologist. Working? I'm a dental anthropologist, which means I take part in active excavations or excavations. Working? You can hear me even without the sound. On? Can you hear me? Okay. So I take part in archaeological excavations, which means whenever we go to, archaeologists go to excavate a cave and they find human remains like teeth or bones, they call the anthropologists and we do the research, we analyze these specimens. Specifically, I deal with dental anthropology, which means I study the evolution of humans in the past and present using their masticatory system. Masticatory system, which means our teeth, our jaws, and our muscles. So we want to know how evolution affected us by studying our teeth. So how it all started. It's probably a very nice sight to see in the morning. Everybody likes to see teeth, right? Fantastic. So when people come to the clinic, patients come to the clinic, we see all kind of malocclusions, all kind of pathologies. And about 85% of the population of our children will need orthodontic treatment. Also adults often need orthodontic treatment, right? I see some people are nodding in the audience. So this is something which is very common in our society. And not only that, when we look at other pathologies, like missing teeth or impacted third molars, you know, the wisdom tooth. How rare it is to see a patient who has 4 wisdom teeth. Who else has 4 wisdom teeth? Okay, it's about the statistics, about 30% of the population, which is quite, I mean, if you consider about normal condition, think about it that most of the population doesn't have 32 teeth. Most of us has less teeth. We have cases of impacted canines, which means that the canine cannot erupt unless we do some kind of a surgical treatment. So many cases suffering from pathologies and malocclusions. So when we talk about modern medicine, and in the dental school we have the cutting edge technologies, we teach our students the best approaches to treat patients. But when we talk about modern medicine, we usually address the question of how. How we treat the patient, how we solve the problem. This is modern medicine, not just in dentistry, but in medicine in general. But I want to take you to a different perspective, which is the evolutionary medicine. And in evolutionary medicine, we address a different question. And the question is, why? Why do we see so many people suffering from this disease? Why do we see 85% of the population who needs orthodontic treatment? Why so many people suffer from these pathologies? And when we look at our teeth, you can see on the left side, you can see an image from the clinic, and you can see on the right side a specimen from Ohalo, which is 22,000 years old specimen that we have in our collection. And if I would ask you, and I'm not talking to the dentists in the crowd, I see you, all the dentists in the crowd, but whoever is not a dentist, what is the difference between this specimen to the modern jaw? What would you say? Crowding, very good. What else? What? All their teeth. They have the wisdom teeth. You see, they have the third molar. What else do you see? Wear, attrition, very good. Are you a dentist? Okay. So we can see the size of the arch, see how the teeth are aligned in the arch. So we can see there's a difference. There's a difference between our ancestors, the way their dentition appears, and what we have today. So in the Dan David Center for Human Evolution, we have one of the largest anthropological collections in the world. We have more than 15,000 specimens representing the entire scale of human evolution, starting from 1 million years ago until recent times. And it gives us really a terrific model to study the changes of evolution based on the fossils that we have in our collection. So what we're actually doing, we're trying to understand what has affected our appearance, what caused us to change so much that we suffer from so many pathologies. So obviously there are a lot of reasons for why we change. It could be nutrition, migration, natural selection, and obviously we don't have all the time now. I mean, I can do that if you want, but I think But we have great presenters later, so I want to have time for them. So let's just go briefly on some of the reasons. It could be genetics and origin. We know that genetics affects our appearance. The shape of our skull, the size of our skull, is dependent on our genes. We have a new ancient DNA laboratory that was now built at the Dan David Center in the Faculty of Medicine, which is a terrific laboratory in which we study genetics, ancient DNA. But you can see here, these two specimens. Do I have a pointer here? Oh, yeah. Do you see So you can see here, this is Chul. It's a young lady, 100,000 years old from the Galil, which is curated in our collection, Kaf-9. Next to it is, I'm sorry, this is Chul. Next to it is Kaf-9. And a modern skull. And you can see the differences, not just in color, obviously. You can see the differences in the size and the shape of the skull. What else do we see? We know that there is a change in diet. Our diet has changed through time. Moving from hunter-gatherer populations into farming changed our nutrition, our habits dramatically, and it affects the shape and the size of our skull and obviously the teeth. Also, our function has changed. We know that we're using our teeth differently than we used before. You know, today as dentists, we tell people, don't do anything with your teeth, right? You might break your incisor, so don't open a bottle, eat soft things, right? Our children ask us to cut the edge of the sandwich because it's too difficult to chew, right? So they eat bamba. Do you have bamba? Okay, very good diet. So it changed. We change our habits. The way we use our teeth has changed. Again, it's affecting our structure. We know that there is a very great link between the function and our appearance and our structure. Once we change the function, it affects our structure as well. What else can we see? We can see the shape we can see the shape of the tooth. The tooth has changed. Here you can see a tooth of a Neanderthal. You know what Neanderthal is? Everybody knows Neanderthal. You met some Neanderthal? So Neanderthal is another group of humans. It probably we lived in the same time. We know that we were interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans. How do we know that? Because we have Neanderthal genes in ourselves. I mean, this is something that we know from today, meaning it was another group of humans that lived parallel to the Homo sapiens. Here you can see some of the analysis that we do in order to evaluate the shape of the tooth. When we want to analyze the morphology, how the tooth is built, we know that the structure of a tooth is like a fingerprint for a population. Each population has a different shape, different morphology of a tooth. And what we're doing, with the help of the Shmunis Family Anthropology Institute that donated a new micro-CT to our laboratory, we're able to scan the tooth virtually, peel off the layer in a very high resolution, and to look into the tooth. Obviously, we don't want to damage the specimen, so we do it virtually, and we can explore the morphology and the changes between various populations. Here you can see in the figure just the example. This is the Nesher Ramle specimen. I don't know if you heard of it. We published it last year in Science. It's a new group of humans that we discovered, but we don't have time for this. So when you come next time, maybe we have time, I will tell you more about it. So how can we use our knowledge of the past to improve future treatment? So you must say to yourself, okay, she's talking about Neanderthals, and those teeth are buried in the cave for hundreds and thousands of years. Why does a dentist have to do anything with this? How can it contribute to our understanding? So I just want to give you a short example of how it can help us understand the pathology. So this, again, teeth, right? And here you can see caries. Caries is the most common chronic disease in the Western society, in the civilized world. More than 95% will suffer from caries. I don't want you to raise your hands. I think I know the answer for the question. And what we see, that caries usually accumulates, the bacteria usually accumulates at the fissures. You see there are grooves and fissures in the surface of the tooth, and this is where the bacteria can penetrate into the tooth, and then it can spread into the inner layers of the tooth, and it's destroying our teeth. Later on, we will need restorations, we need root canal treatment, we need crowns, then the teeth will be extracted, and then you will need implants, you know, right? This is how we make a living, right, Jerry? Okay. So why do we have so much caries? So many people suffer from caries. 95%. When we look at the archaeological collection and anthropological collection, we don't have such high prevalence of caries. So one of the things that we see is the change in morphology. Look how a tooth of a 14,000 years old specimen looks like, and look at a modern tooth. Look how many grooves and fissures we have. So if you have so many fissures, the bacteria have more place to sit in, okay? So this is one reason. Another reason that we found is the thickness of the outer layer of the tooth. The tooth is covered with enamel, which is a very strong layer. This is the most mineralized tissue in the human body. It's stronger than your bones. Enamel is really 96% mineral. And it's supposed to cover and protect our teeth. But we know today that the thickness of this layer is becoming thinner. When we compare our teeth to teeth of people who lived 10,000 years ago, they had more enamel, meaning that if you have the bacteria, it has to go a shorter way in order to penetrate into the tooth. So this is another factor we need to consider. What else we need to consider? The function. We say that we changed our function. If we use our teeth and we grind them, there's attrition that affects our teeth. It's actually flattening the outer surface. Instead of having these fissures, grinding our teeth due to diet, due to function, results in a flat surface of the tooth. If your tooth is being flattened, there is no place for caries to adhere to the tooth. And how we use it today, just to show you a short example, this is what we're doing for our children. When a child comes to the clinic and we want to prevent caries, in case they don't have caries yet, we use fissure sealer. We put some material inside the tooth. And why do we do that? We're actually imitating the process of attrition. We're flattening the crown. So even if the dentist is doing it, he doesn't know why he's doing it. This is actually imitating the process that our ancestor had physiologically. We lost it during the way, but this is something that it's probably related to the increased prevalence of caries today. So, to conclude, we know that study the past, if you would, divine the future. We really believed in order to give our patients the best treatment and to give our students the best understanding, not just of how to treat the patients, but to understand the real reasons for why we're suffering from the disease, we have to give them the broader perspective, and this is what we're trying to do in our laboratory. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Sarig. Our second lecturer, talking about the present, is Professor Hila Shamir from our Faculty of Law. Professor Shamir is an expert in the fields of employment, labor, immigration, and welfare law. She has received 2 prestigious European Research Council awards, ERC grants, as we call them, the second of which was received just this year, and it addresses a new labor law for supply chain capitalism. This is also the topics of Hila's talk here today. Hila.
So thank you very much. Racheli is a hard act to follow. Not fair, I should have gone first. But it's really a pleasure to be here today, and thank you to Professor Shtaif and to the organizers for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. So my name is Hila Shamir. I'm a professor of law here at Tel Aviv University, just the building over there. I teach labor and employment and law and migration and gender. And I'm currently in the last days of my previous ERC, European Research Commission grant. As some of you heard me talk about it yesterday, I saw you before in the lab tour. My previous ERC was on human trafficking and modern slavery. But today I'm not going to talk about that. I will talk to you about my new ERC, which is looking at a new labor law for supply chain capital. Oh, sorry. How do I go back? Here. A new worker power and a new labor law for supply chain capitalism. So labor law is gradually protecting less and less of the world's workers. Changes in the structures of work, the structure of capital, and modes of supply and production lead to a misfit between the distribution of market power and current labor law, creating barriers for workers who seek to organize for collective representation or to enforce basic workplace rights. The result has been deteriorating wages and working conditions for many workers in the developing and the developed world. In particular, at the low-wage end of the spectrum, and continued harsh working conditions for many workers, particularly in the global south. In my next ERC research grant, I explore the contours of a new labor law for supply chain capitalism, inquiring whether and how can labor law be relevant and accessible for workers, particularly those at the bottom of global and domestic value chains. So my premise is that the history of the labor movement teaches us that despite its limits in different contexts, national and transnational regulation that sustain workers' unionization and collective bargaining is a necessary power resource for workers, one that is currently missing in action. To adapt labor law, we're in need of a new legal structure to support workers' ability to operate collectively, make their voices heard in the workplace, and receive a greater share of the profits. While there have been calls for union revitalization, what I think we need is actually a parallel call to rethink and restructure labor law for supply chain capitalism. So what do I mean by supply chain capitalism? What I'm talking about is what, oh, sorry, forgot this. I told you I needed a Madonna. Is it working? Yeah, okay. So by supply chain capitalism, I refer to Anna Tsing's definition to commodity chains, actually you can't see it well here, based on subcontracting, outsourcing, and allied arrangements in which the autonomy of component enterprise is legally established, even as the enterprises are disciplined within the chain as a whole. So we're talking about a new work arrangement, a new arrangement of the way we produce, of the way we consume, and of the way a lot of people around the world, hundreds of millions of workers, work. This is what is known as global value chains, right? Everything we see in this room is produced by these global value chains, probably everything you wear, your glasses, of course your iPhones. Global value chains, this term really seeks to capture the process of specialization and geographic fragmentation of supply and production, often exhibiting in the transfer of the labor-intensive parts of the production process to emerging economies. What is happening under supply chain capitalism and under the situation of global value chains is that labor law became what Ulrich Beck calls a zombie category, an idea that lives on even though the reality to which it corresponds is dead. So my project is really about this, go like this. Thank you, Chaya. So the goal is really to understand how can we adapt the tools that developed over the years in labor law and labor institutions in order to adapt them to the new realities of capital. So the underlying premise of labor law to this day, I know many of you are not labor lawyers, but maybe some are, is that we have this a dyadic relationship between an employer and an employee, And labor law is the law that negotiates that contractual relationship. So we define both our employment relationship and our collective agreement through using this dyadic relationship, right? So in order to have a collective agreement, we know that it needs to apply to the bargaining unit, which is often all workers of a specific employer. When we strike, we can only strike against our employer. We can't strike about another entity, against another entity. And the collective agreement, again, is negotiated and signed with our employer. However, under GVC capitalism, under supply chain capitalism, we have a whole new arrangement. We have a lead firm at the top of the supply chain. Think about Nike, think about Microsoft, that through contracting produces the goods. Okay, so instead we moved in legal terms, we moved from a property relationship where the employer owned the means of production and then paid the workers. We moved to a contracting. So we moved from make to buy, right? Now a lot of lead firms are buying many of the elements of what they produce. In this situation, labor law no longer fits the structure. It's no longer there to protect the workers. Let's say the workers at the bottom of the supply chain want to strike against their employer. The lead firm, let's say they're even successful. Amazingly, the garment workers in Bangladesh unionized. They managed to get a collective agreement and improve their working conditions. What will the lead firm do? Now labor costs are more expensive, right? They don't want to pay more. They'll move to another supplier. This means that workers have no collective power vis-a-vis the real owner of capital. The real structure of power in production and supply is no longer supported by labor institutions. Currently, the attempts to regulate this new arrangement, and there is a great understanding around the world that this phenomenon is really causing deterioration in workers' rights at the bottom of supply chains. Actually, also modern slavery, right? Those of you from Australia and the UK may be aware of the Modern Slavery Acts in your countries that actually require firm corporations to say what they're doing in order to prevent modern slavery in their supply chains. Right? We know the trade bans in the US are now banning goods coming into the country that were produced via forced labor, right? This is supposed to attract the lead firm. So a lot of the regulation that's happening now, and we see it, as I said, in the UK, in Australia, in the US, but very predominantly in Europe, Germany, France, the Netherlands, and now a new EU directive calling for human rights due diligence taken by corporations to make sure that through their supply chains, due diligence is taken to make sure human rights are respected and sustainability aims are met. This is the focus of regulation now. It looks at the lead firm. However, extensive research that is already going on shows us that it's not enough. What I'm calling for in my research is to think about the role of workers, the countervailing power. Corporations on their own, even with supporting regulation, do not take enough means and sometimes just don't know what's happening 5 tiers away, right? 5 contractual tiers away. How can they know what the situation of workers? I suggest that in order for that, we need worker voice. We need worker collective power. In order for that to happen, we need a new labor law for supply chain capitalism. So why do we need a new labor law? The 3 premises of labor law are first, that workers have bargaining power vis-a-vis the employer, right? We know that when workers strike, it hurts the employer. No more production, right? But under supply chain capitalism, this is no longer the case. Another premise of labor law, workers and employers are repeat players. They need each other. If the one side will say, well, I don't care, it can't, workers can't just say, we don't care, because they need the workplace. And the same goes for employers. So unions and employers, we assume, have a long-term relationship. This is no longer the case under supply chain capitalism. Finally, we are under labor law, we think we know what's the bargaining unit, what it looks like. We think it's all the workers of the employer. Well, under supply chain capitalism, the production structure can be so long that it's difficult to define what's the bargaining unit. Do we go all the way back to raw materials? or when we think about the cotton that produces the shirts for Nike, or maybe we're just thinking about the production process, right? How are we going to define this? So collective bargaining under GVCs really kind of is undermined by these three premises that kind of animate labor law and labor institutions and no longer exist under supply chain capitalism. Now, this happens from two reasons. First, as I said, it's the crisis of governance of labor in global value chains. We've seen a lot of attempts. This is a field where there's a lot of activity in order to make corporations responsible for what happens throughout their supply chains. So first we saw it through the rise of corporate social responsibility, right? Corporations saying, we are socially responsible. We're gonna adopt a code of conduct. We're gonna adopt a voluntary code. But what we know is that CSR so far has been mostly ineffective on its own. As a result, governments are saying, okay, we're gonna step in. Corporations can't do this on their own. So we're going to ask corporations to do this. This is the legislation I talked about before. Modern Slavery Act, this transparency legislation requiring corporations to say what they're doing to make sure there are no workers' rights violations down their supply chain. And now, already understanding that transparency on its own is not enough, human rights due diligence, saying you don't only have to tell us what you're doing, you actually have to take action to make sure that there are different practices in your supply chain. However, so far, litigation under this legislation did not succeed. We don't have one successful case for various reasons that I won't get into at the moment, but again, as Racheli said before, we can have a whole other lecture about that. A very promising alternative model is what is called worker-driven social responsibility. This was developed in the tomato fields of Florida, and what happened there is that workers at the bottom of the supply chain bargain with the lead firm, making sure that the farmers comply with a certain code of conduct that is developed by the workers in collaboration through collective bargaining, a form of collective bargaining with the lead firm. And so if the farmers don't comply, there's a sanction, and the sanction is they're out of the supply chain, okay? So worker-driven social responsibility is seen as extremely successful. It got the President Medal in the US for anti-trafficking, but we also know that it's very challenging to scale it up. There are various dynamics in the Florida tomato fields that make it work. It doesn't work elsewhere. The Bangladesh Accord, maybe some of you heard about that, of health and safety, following the Rana Plaza disaster, so far seems to have failed. How much time do I have? I need to finish. Okay, so let me just finish by telling you what my project is about. And it'll be very brief. So what I'm identifying is that we need a new labor law for supply chain capitalism. I hope I convinced you in that. What do we need to do? We really need to rethink labor law. First, we need to think about how the collective agreement will look like, right? The collective agreement that used to be between the employer and the employees is no longer sufficient. We need a multilateral agreement. How will that look like? How will it be binding? It can't be CSR. We know that's not working. Second, we need to understand who are going to be parties to this collective agreement. What is the bargaining unit determination? Are we going to go all the way to the raw resources? Is it going to be transnational? Is it going to be just the workers in Bangladesh? What is it going to look like? Third, we need to find something to replace the strike, right? The strike is not sufficient. Maybe it can be sufficient. Strikes in ports, in trains, you know, the kind of the infrastructures of GVCs, but it's not always enough. So we need to think of other tools. Fourth, what will international labor unions look like? How do we create solidarity among such differently situated workers? And finally, jurisdiction. Who's going to enforce this new tool that I'm imagining? There's a lot of experimentation on the ground with all of these. What my project does is tries to understand from workers on the ground and from workers' organizations on the ground, what do they need? The current attempts on the ground are outside of the scope of labor law. Even the Fair Food Program that I mentioned before clearly states we are not a union, we do not use labor law. But what we see is that it's difficult to scale it up. It's difficult to replicate. So what I'm trying to find out is how we can recreate these power resources for workers to address their needs and prevent exploitation of workers under supply chain capitalism. Thank you very much.
Thank you Professor Shamir, and now we're continuing with our third speaker, the one responsible for providing us with a glimpse into the future. And this is Professor Liat Kishon-Rabin, Dean of the Innovation in Teaching and Learning Center. Liat is also a professor of communication disorders at the Sackler Faculty of Medicine, and as such, she was responsible for many initiatives and innovative projects that are very central to the life of our campus. Before she became dean, she served as head of the School of Health Professions in the Faculty of Medicine. The title of her talk will be Who Needs Lectures? Bringing Value to Campus Learning in the Digital Age.
Thank you very much. Wow, I really can't see anybody. I feel like I'm talking to an empty hall. Now I have two very difficult acts to follow, so this is going to be a major challenge. Good morning, everybody. Professor Shtaif, Mrs. Daphne Nechmad Meitar, or Meitar Nechmad, distinguished guests, governors, and dear friends of Tau. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here today talking to you. I was asked to answer this question, who needs lecture, but I have the suspicion that the Tau management actually wanted to know what is the added value that we are giving our undergraduates at the cost and price of the high rental fee at Tel Aviv, staying in traffic for so long, even if they live 2 kilometers away, because that has actually a lot of implications, ramifications, especially budget-wise. Maybe lecture halls are passé, maybe buildings should be built only for research purposes. So these are important questions that we need to ask. Now, as Mark just said, I'm a researcher, and I'd like to answer questions based on evidence. Interestingly enough, these questions are being asked by first-year universities. We're not the only ones, and they're really struggling with this. And there's not much evidence to base decisions on. Mind you, there are a lot of opinions. Some believe that the remote learning is the right way. AI should drive our learning. Some believe that learning should be in the industry, in the workplace. Others believe to come campus. So there are a lot of opinions. However, the data are based on very small studies, small-scale studies. We're at the point also that we realize, an example is the pandemic, that there are all kinds of global effects that affect higher education. Luckily for us, the pandemic did teach us something, and this is where I'm resorting to what also we heard before, that we need to go to our past, because actually our past may teach us a lot of things, and that may kind of show us the way to the future. So I'm not going to talk about Confucius as my previous speaker did, and I'm going to actually quote somebody who's much more recent, Yigal Allon. He was a respected commander of the Palmach, which is the pre-state IDF, and later on for 25 years he was a member of parliament, the Knesset, and he said that a nation that doesn't respect its past will have a dull present and an uncertain future. So there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. It may be that learning from the past, what constituted good teaching, is the key to understanding how to prepare for the future. Past learning methods from past, I mean ancient Greece, not as far away as Racheli talked about, included the Socratist method, developed by the philosopher Socrates, and involves asking questions to stimulate critical thinking and answers. It cultivates logical reasons, effective communication, and the ability to evaluate and analyze and help individuals arrive at their own conclusions. Mentorship is when an experienced person, a mentor, provides guidance, support, and advice to a less experienced person. There's apprenticeship, which is a learning method where young individuals acquire a trade or skills under the guidance of a master craftsman or a skilled expert. It provides hands-on experience and promotes interpersonal relations professionalism, functional skills, and teamwork. Chevruta, where two or more people study together. It is considered an essential part, of Jewish learning and has been used for centuries. Similar to the Socrates method, partners engage in a dialogue to understand the text and to analyze it from different perspectives. While these are ancient learning methods, they are still very relevant to this day. So what makes these learning methods resilient to the need of change? We believe that all these methods have the basic components that are essential for effective learning. Active engagement through hands-on activity, discussions, or problem-solving exercises are known to significantly advance learning. Feedback should be provided so learners can understand what they're doing well and what they need to improve. This is done by providing constructive criticism, praise, or corrections. Just giving out grades is not good enough. Practice makes perfect. Repetition and practice helps learners refine their skills and reinforce what they've learned by consolidating their knowledge and skills into memory and long-term memory. Relevance of the material to the learner's goals and interests increases the student's motivation to engage in the learning process. Learning is a social process. By nature, humans are social beings and as such are highly motivated and are much more engaged in the task when other people are involved. And motivation. There are many studies, including my own personal ones, showing the importance of motivation for a successful process. It could be either external or internal motivation. And it's important that the learning methods would be adaptable and flexible enough to accommodate to the differences of the needs and preferences of the learners as well as influences of time. So we believe that these components are the most important for effective learning and form the DNA of learning. And please, I want to note here that this term has been borrowed from genetics just for the sake of simplicity, and I hope I'm not offending anybody here who's a geneticist. So if these methods are so good for effective learning, why is it that until not too long ago, the major method of teaching was sage on the stage, or what we call frontal teaching? To answer that, we need to go back again to our history lesson. Institutes of higher education, as we know, called universities, were established 1,000 years ago. In Europe, Bologna, South America, Peru, and in the United States, Harvard. They were established so society would benefit from the scholarly expertise generated in these institutions. It took about 1,000 years and 3 revolutions, the Industrial Revolution, the Demographic Revolution, and the Happiness Revolution, and if we have time, I'll explain each one what it is, for the teaching methods in the university to gradually evolve from those that we know were effective to stage on the stage or frontal teaching. These revolutions led to more people wanting to learn and acquire official certificates of knowledge. So the surge in students resulted on multiple small classes, and that had a toll on the budget. It was more cost-effective to teach large groups of students at once, and that was also the case when there were a limited number of available instructors. It forced to conduct a large class of one instructor with expertise and knowledge, allowing many more students to have access to that instructor. Large classrooms also provided consistent learning, which reduced the risk of discrepancies in the learning experience. And finally, large classrooms solve the problem of diversity and inclusion because they can provide a diverse learning environment with students from different backgrounds and experiences. So while frontal teaching addressed important issues, at the same time, it also influenced the genetic expression and not in a good way. Many of the basic components of learning were not expressed or weakened considerably, which influenced the effectiveness of learning and reduced the students' motivation to come to classroom. Then came the 4th revolution, the digital revolution, which further influenced our teaching methods because knowledge can now be easily transferred remotely. This is where we were just before the pandemic, and many believed that this is also where we should be heading to. In a way, we were lucky that during the pandemic we had a taste of fully online learning. It sped our realization that remote learning can be counterproductive for many students. They had difficulties planning their time, learning alone, and they missed social encounters and support from the peers and from the professors. We also know that drop rates of asynchronic courses such as MOOCs are much greater than that one comes to campus for. But since the pandemic, we at Tau are making extra efforts to recruit digital technology to enhance effective learning. We're proud to say that over the last couple of years, the Center of Innovation in Teaching and Learning has helped and supported academic staff members to implement changes in over 400 courses that involved technology in different ways for promoting learning. For example, you see here in the picture, much of the transfer of knowledge can be done via high-quality digital filming of courses or segment of courses for the students to watch at their preferred time and place. The short clips you see here are taken from full or partial fully online courses we have developed. Note that practice and active learning are embedded within the videos using advanced technology. Virtual reality has been now implemented in over 10 courses in all disciplines taught. VR is used for enhancing learning experience by assisting in understanding concepts, allowing practice in cases where it is difficult to provide repetitions, or when simulating case studies. In the inserts here, you see students learning neuroanatomy from 3D models of the brain developed by Professor DeVoe. Use of VR results in an increase in student success and motivation, as we found in the data that we're collecting. Artificial intelligence can assist in personalized learning. We know that for learning too, one size does not fit all. Students can progress at their own pace with a method of learning that best suits them. Analytics from the Moodle learning platform is a great tool for providing information for the teacher, which material was easy, which students need extra support. And in the example that you saw in the insert is a generative AI as GPT, which is helpful for both learning and teaching as long as it's done correctly. And we're going now through the different faculties to advise which tools, and we tailor them for the needs of the specific discipline. To date, we can conclude that when applied correctly, technology enhances learning, but it's not enough. To make learning even better, we need to incorporate the human factor. One of the important advantages of technology is that it frees time for the lecturer to use it on campus with the students. For example, Sage on the Stage can be replaced with social activities as debates that promote critical thinking, verbal expression, questioning and analyzing, listening to others, formulating thoughts into coherent verbal arguments, and the ability to understand the other side. Imagine that our politicians had such skills. Our parliament would have sounded, and our society would have been much better. And you see here in this insert a real debate that happened a few weeks ago at Tau, and this is one of our excellent art students debating. So we have also now the freed time to do what we call academic apprenticeship. It's an important aspect of many of the professional disciplines. Students receive hands-on experience, not only a one-to-one supervised professional, by also by someone who has strong academic background who can tie the theory to practice. And this is what we call the gold standard of studies. And this is implemented in university clinics like in the dental school, engineering, law, and more. So campus time, space, and facilities can be effectively used also for project-based learning, promoting formulation of questions, critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, and setting the basis for more research in graduate studies. You can see here in the insert examples from the seismographic class, and now you see how they're very happy and that they've solved the problem. So overall, digital technology combined with the human factor are two epigenetic components that can optimize learning. Our mission now is to find the best relative weighting of these two components, which will vary depending on the discipline, the course, and the available technology. So if we go back to the original questions, do we need campus, is there campus value for learning in the digital age? I would definitely say yes. But I think learning spaces should be designed for the digital era. Smaller classroom and furniture that can be adapted to the course. However, this discussion brings up a more fundamental question of how much do we want technology to replace the human skills. With each day, we're introduced to more powerful AI tools than the developers themselves imagined, and we just heard that the other night. Not only for efficient storage and integration of knowledge and ability to perform tasks accurately and efficiently, but AI is starting to possess skills that were once associated only with humans, such as reasoning. So we at Tau believe that our role is to help improve society. When our students graduate, they should have the important skills that will allow them not only to develop, adapt to a changing world, be successful, but today more than ever, we realize the importance of becoming good citizens with values, morals, ethical considerations. Yes, we believe that when you develop something, you should think, is it going to be harmful to mankind? How do we agree on basic values that support human society? And what do we do when we disagree on them? We hope that by making these changes to the curricula and to the methods of teaching and learning throughout the disciplines and faculties on campus, we will make an impact on society in Israel and in the world. And of course, ensure that our students have added value to come to campus. Today, geopolitical events and technological advances have taught us the fragility of our existence the way we're accustomed to. Therefore, we must be ahead of the game, and we hope to do so with your help. And before I end, I want to thank my amazing team, over 50 professional staff, dedicated staff that are going throughout the campus and are helping to implement the changes that I've just talked about. And in particular, I'd like to help Michal Yalkoni, Ofra Khan, Ortal Enderberg, and Aditor for this particular, for helping in their contribution to this presentation. And I want to thank you for listening and for your valuable contribution to the campus. Thank you very much.
We will now have a short panel, an opportunity to discuss some of the items and the...
Is this working?
No, it is. Okay. So thank you for your wonderful presentations. And we'll have time for a couple of questions. I would like to first ask you to describe briefly, when you think of the future, what are your main concerns with respect to your professions? The things that you talked about and other things. And what would calm them down also? Go ahead, Hila.
So I think currently my fear here in Israel is definitely for democracy. I think the role of lawyers, I'm teaching a law school, is in some ways under threat as an institution supporting democracy. And my biggest fear at the moment is how to teach students to think about social change, equality, and justice in a system that to me feels like it's undermining it. And I think we already see some of the implications of ongoing processes in the recent Just yesterday, we saw results in exams of Israeli children in reading. I think that is part of that system. We see defunding of education, both higher education and general education. And to me, that's the gravest concern. What will change that? Well, struggling for democracy.
Heli?
So for the I will talk about the dental profession, because for evolution, it's a little bit different. So I think the problem in dentistry in Israel is the availability of treatment for children and the entire population. Not everybody can afford treatment. One of the things we're doing in the dental school is trying to provide treatment to different layers of the population that cannot afford being treated in other places. For some reason in Israel, the teeth and mouth is not part of the human body. And therefore, you don't get it free of charge currently. And this is a major problem. We see a lot of children suffer from very severe conditions, and they have nowhere to go, and they cannot afford treatment. And this is something that really worries me. I hope that the dental school will be a leading factor in changing regulations. Maybe you will help me with regulations. Changing regulations and providing better treatment to whoever needs it.
Liat?
I guess I'll combine my answer between my role as a communication disorders clinician and my research there, which deals with brain development in infants and the need to do so much active learning and a lot of multimodal activity in order to develop good functional brain. And then later on in life, we're so much dependent on technology. And truthfully, my worry is that eventually technology will take over a lot of things that our brain needs in order to develop. And
Is it bad?
well, it depends at what point, because just like in genetics and in nuclear energy, the regulation did decide when it's used for the good of mankind and when it's not used for good of mankind. And I think we weren't aware enough of how much damage AI, especially generative AI, can do for the development of brain and functioning of it. Racheli showed that when you don't use it, you lose it. Yes. And this is something that I think we need to think about. And I think some of my fear will go away. You ask how if I'll be less fearful. I think as a university, we should have a role in educating our students, even engineering and exact sciences. I've mentioned that before. I don't see any reason why when these students develop things, even if right now it's an algorithm, only for the exercise of it to think, what can it do to mankind? What are the good things that can help and what are the bad things? In order for later on for regulators to think if we can stop in a time. Because right now I'm not sure we stopped on time some of these generative AIs.
So I'm curious, given your concerns, right? Given your concerns, what do you think about the way in which your profession is being taught? Your respective professions are being taught, and how is that going to relax your fears about the future? Or how should they be adopted? You should start, Liat. You can go ahead.
Again, I'll divide into two. I think that we can use a lot of technology in order to, just as I said in my presentation, to enhance off-campus learning. A lot of information can be accessed in different ways, but I think we can substitute active learning, academic apprenticeship with remote learning. So I think this is important, and I think we're doing it. I think we're on the way. In terms of campus things, I think, as I mentioned, we need to think more broadly of how to do things in order to make sure that we have some regulations and not to say the train left the station, it's too late for us.
Thank you. Let's hear Racheli's.
So we need to address knowledge and skills. So knowledge is one thing, and you can get it also virtually in all kinds of platforms. But skills, and I might add, we have manual skills and soft skills. This is something you cannot get virtually. This is something that we need the people in front of us, especially if we're in the profession of caregiving, like dentists or physicians or speech therapists. You have to have the direct relationship with the patient. You have to know how to address the person in front of you. So the technology is crucial and essential, especially in the field of dental medicine, but it's not replacing the ability to think, to diagnose correctly, and to be able to transfer the treatment to your patient and being empathic to the person in front of you.
You're happy with how these things are taught today?
Okay. Obviously, we always need to improve. We're in the process of developing the technologies, but we have to find the balance. And I don't think we got to the balance just yet. I mean, the COVID really pushed us into the virtual direction, and now we're going back to the classes. But we probably have to find some kind of a balance between the knowledge that we can definitely transfer virtually. We don't need the students to sit in a class and teach them everything, but we need to find the right prescription for our students. We're not there yet.
Let's hear Hila, Shamir.
So I think in law, it's definitely too much sage on the stage, if I had to use Liat's terminology from earlier on. It's still a problem that we are trying to work out, again, that balance. I can say that in my own personal teaching, I moved to flipped class in my labor law class, which means the students study at home like the knowledge, and then they come to class and we have time to work in small groups, to sharpen their argumentation skills, think about both sides. So I'm a great believer in that. I think another thing we have at the law school currently that we're trying to expand is the legal clinics. Again, those of you who heard me yesterday, heard me talk, I work with the Workers' Rights Legal Clinic, and this is an opportunity for students to actually meet clients and to represent them and to see, really experience firsthand what the limitations and powers of law and lawyering. And I think that's something that is irreplaceable through technology. So I think we really need to mix that. And I think I agree with Racheli about the skill versus knowledge. But then also the moment that through skills you acquire knowledge.
How is it related to the concerns that you described about the future?
Well, I do think that only through a classroom dynamic we can model a democratic, pluralistic society. It's more difficult to do that with technology. I know maybe technology one day will be able to do that, but there's nothing like a good conversation between two people who don't agree and need to find a place to agree with each other. And so in that sense, I think that classroom activity, on-campus activity, and for us also meeting clients is absolutely, and meeting people in need of assistance is absolutely key to support and sustain democratic practices and habits and culture.
So, thank you. I have one question that I have to ask you. It so happened that you are three women. And I want you to, if you don't mind, suggest, what would you suggest to young women or girls who are thinking about an academic profession, about joining the path of doing research and becoming professors in a university? What are your reflections on that?
Persistence.
Do you recommend this career?
Do I recommend?
Yes.
It's the greatest place to be. It's the greatest place to work in. You have freedom to think whatever you want. You have the freedom to design and aspire, and it's so diverse. You work in the lab, you teach, you have interaction with students, you lecture to people, you go all over the world, you have conferences, you have mutual collaborations with people from all over the world. I don't think you can find any profession like that that is so varied and so fascinating.
That is true for men and women.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
In addition to what was said, I think this is a great profession to make an impact if you really want to make a difference in society through your students, in the community. this is a great place to, as was said, to have freedom, but it's a freedom also to do your research, but also to make a lot of ripple, and there's a great ripple effect of influencing others and making it a better place. So the only thing that I think we as women should remember, and I can say this because I'm older than these two, is that there was once, or maybe still is, women are more multitasking on campus than men, and it's counterproductive. We are asked to do a lot of things, we don't say no to them, and it affects our production. So that's the only thing that I would say to a newer, younger ones. Start to say no, although you won't be happy that I'm saying that.
Say no, but not to me.
Exactly.
Hila, do you want to comment on that?
So I think what I would tell women thinking about academia is that it's still very much a male-dominated profession, that you need to be the best in the room still in order to make progress, and that you need to work hard, really hard. You need to plan your life, find a spouse, a partner that will be supportive. That's the key. And that you need to work as hard as you can, and then it's the best job on earth.
Thank you. So thank you for your wonderful talks and for the panel. Before we separate for the break, I would like to call Rava Elazari from the Public Affairs Division to explain to us what is going to happen and what follows. Thank you.
Break. Good morning. Did everyone enjoy the lab tour yesterday? Yes, yes. So, just as Professor Shamir said, there is nothing like a good conversation. So in your next two sessions, we're getting up close and personal. It won't be in this hall. There will be small group gatherings. After your break, okay, we will have two sessions. The first one is on student diversity. The second one is on interdisciplinary research. So you'll go for your small break, and then you will walk just across the breezeway here to the Naftali Building of Social Sciences. You don't have to schlep around the campus. It's just 13 steps. I checked. So you'll take your break. This is how it works. Then you will go to the lobby of the Naftali Building. Our staff will guide you to the right room. And then after that small group session, you'll have another very small break and go back to that same lobby, and our staff will once again guide you to the right session. Enjoy our small group gatherings.
Thank you. Thank you for attending.